Working with a metronome is fundamental to the act of practicing for any musician on any instrument. Not only is it important to help us increase our execution with the instrument, but it is important to increasing our sense of time, our ability to feel the beat and to contextualize what we are playing. So in this video, I'm going to explore a few of my own ideas as to how we can best incorporate the metronome into our practice and make sure we are benefiting from it, because this is something some of my students struggle with and something some musicians are a little bit unsure about. I'm essentially going to cover two topics today: how to apply the metronome in a conceptual way to our practice, and how to apply it in a very productive way within the practice sessions themselves. So first of all, what is the metronome for? I feel the metronome fulfills two absolutely fundamental functions. First of all, it gives us the beat itself. This is, of course, pertinent to the time signature in which we are practicing, but nevertheless, any rhythm, any passage of music we are playing is written against an underlying beat, and this is something that the metronome voices at the given tempo. Secondly, the metronome allows us to focus on the individual subdivisions within the figure we are practicing, and this is something that is vitally important when it comes to our execution and the accuracy of our rhythm within the beat. So let's discuss both of these things in turn. I'm going to use a very, very simple example of a paradiddle figure on the snare drum. We can apply this process to any passage on any instrument, but for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to keep it very, very simple. The first thing we need to do is understand what is the time signature of the figure we are playing and what is the subdivision we are using. So I'm going to use a basic paradiddle figure that sounds like this. We can hear 4 clear accents of the bar, and we can hear what sound like 16th notes running between each accent. 1 E-ander, 2 E-ander, 3 E-ander, 4 E-ander. So I'm going to practice this in the time signature of 4/4. So the first thing I'm going to do is set my metronome to 4/4 and set it at a steady tempo that is comfortable enough for me to play this without difficulty. For the sake of demonstration, I'm going to go at 80 beats per minute. And here is our beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we will notice the first beat of each 4 is accented slightly. This is really important because it helps us feel where the first beat of each bar is. And this is something we need to pay attention to. So, because we know that the accent of the paradiddle falls on the beat, we need to make sure that when we play the paradiddle, the accents line up with the beat. 2, 3, 4. Now, while I'm practicing like this, it's a really good idea to vocalize the count. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. This fulfills a number of functions, but crucially it contextualizes the passage we're playing against the meter in which we are playing it. In other words, it helps us know exactly where the beat is and exactly where we are in the bar when we are playing our figure. Now, this may sound easy, this may sound obvious, but it is actually a really important step that is often neglected. It is no good simply practicing a figure out of context in total isolation, because when it comes to applying it within the context, we might find we're unprepared. We're not sure where the beat lines up. We're not sure the right speed we're supposed to come in at. All of these issues can be solved by working in this manner. So when we have the metronome going and we are playing our passage, we are focusing on 3 things. We're focusing on our execution aligning with the beat correctly, we're focusing on counting the beat itself, and we're focusing on marking the first beat of each bar. Now, as you just heard there, this was as simple as counting to 4 each time, and even in my own mind, subtly accenting the first beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. It's that emphasis that helps me really feel the start of each bar and how that aligns with the start of the passage I'm playing. With that done, the next step is to tackle the subdivisions themselves. I've already stated that these paradiddles comprise 16th notes, so I can set my metronome to voice those 16th notes within the bar. Now we can hear everything we could hear previously, but we're marking the individual 16th notes as well. Now, when I practice in this manner, it allows me to switch my focus. I'm no longer strictly focused on the macro timing of the beats and the bars, but I'm focused on the micro timing of the subdivisions and each individual stroke that I play. So when I practice this time, I'm focusing on a much smaller set of time, a much smaller period of time, trying to make sure that every stroke of my paradiddle aligns cleanly with every note of the subdivision. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. So I now have an extra layer to which I can turn my focus. Am I focused on the first beat of the bar? Am I focused on marking the beats themselves, or am I focused on marking the individual subdivisions? And you can hear that this is alluded to by how I am choosing to count it. I can simply count the bars themselves. 1, 1, or the beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or I can count the subdivision. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. All three of those have their benefits, and I think it's important to make sure you are comfortable with all three of them as you are practicing. Now, of course, you might find that there are passages that do not contain just one note value. You might have a passage that has a dotted 8th note and a 16th note, followed by 2 8th notes, followed by 4 16th notes. It doesn't matter. Essentially, you need to find the smallest note value within the rhythmic passage and use that as the underlying subdivision. Now, we can turn our attention to making the metronome work for us and help us get the most of our practice time. Practicing is not about doing endless repetitions mindlessly. It is about focusing and getting the most efficient bang for our buck, getting the most productivity from what we are doing. We might only have 10 minutes to practice. We might have an hour. We might have 5 hours. It doesn't matter. We want to make sure we are focused and using that time properly. And a metronome, I think, can really help us with this. So for this example, I'm going to stick with my paradiddles and I'm going to start using the loop function, which virtually all digital metronomes have. This essentially lets you set the metronome to run a certain number of times before it shuts off, and this is going to be determined by the time signature. So if I set my loop function to 5, it's going to run for 5 bars of 4/4 before it stops. This is really valuable because it helps us make sure we are getting in a certain amount of repetitions and allowing us to focus for the whole duration of those. So I like to use 12 repetitions. I think 12 is a good number because it helps us focus on a larger amount of repetitions without running into the hundreds and hundreds where our focus can start to wander, and it is unclear in the scientific literature whether that many repetitions in one go is even productive for us anyway. So I like to work with a block of 12. And once I've done that block of 12, I evaluate how well I produced them, how well I played the passage. Now, I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me go through 12 repetitions of paradiddle, so I'm just going to use 2. But I'm actually going to set my metronome to 3 because I'm going to use the first bar as a count-in. I'm going to remove the subdivision, so we're focusing solely on the beats themselves. And I'm going to have a go, 80 BPM, playing that paradiddle pattern twice through as best as I can. 3, 4, 1, 2. And you see my metronome has shut off automatically. Now I can evaluate. Let's assume I've just done 12 repetitions, 12 bars. I can evaluate whether or not I was satisfied with the quality of my execution. Very simply, if I was satisfied, I'm going to increase the tempo by 2 BPM. If I was not satisfied, if I made a mistake or I didn't execute it cleanly enough, I'm going to reduce the tempo by 1 BPM. And what I like to do with this, whatever figure I'm working on, is I like to choose a 10 BPM range, and I like to begin at the bottom of that 10 and try to arrive at the top of the 10. And as you can see, if I do it correctly, I get to advance 2 BPM. And if I make a mistake, I come backwards by 1. So I'm always moving forwards to a sense, but I'm giving myself chance to tackle any execution errors I may encounter along the way. So for the sake of demonstrating this concept, I'm going to take a slightly different figure now. I'm going to take a passage from my own composition and show you one of the passages that I'm actually working on. This is in the time signature of 9/8, and it's a 2-bar figure. The figure, slowly, sounds like this. Just like that. It's relatively simple rudimentally, but it's something that is to be performed quite fast within the piece. Now, my target tempo is 180 beats per minute in 9/8, which sounds like this. Now, I'm not quite yet comfortable playing it at that speed. You see, I'm not quite there yet. So that is a target. That is something I'm working up to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my loop function to 5. That gives me 1 bar of counting, and then I get to play the whole passage twice through. I'm going to set the tempo, for the sake of demonstration, at a lowly, let's go 130. Let's see how 130 sounds. And I can evaluate, was that good enough? Now let's just assume for the sake of example, it was. I bump up 2 BPM. Okay, up 2 BPM. That time, I made a mistake. I missed the right-hand accent, so I drop by 1. So in the case of those previous repetitions, I've now arrived at a tempo of 133 BPM. I'm 3 steps closer to my 140 goal, but I've had to go back a BPM because I made a mistake. Now this sounds like an awful lot of work. Now first of all, imagine that we are doing a lot more repetitions per tempo, a minimum of 12. You could go to 20, you could go to 50, 100, it really doesn't matter, but you are trying to dedicate enough of your time to the actual repetitions themselves. I'm just shortening it here for the sake of demonstration. So first of all, let's assume you are playing a minimum of 12 bars per tempo range, per tempo figure. Next, the act of only increasing by 2 BPM ensures we are actually increasing our tempo, but makes sure it is a small enough jump that we are able to keep in control of everything we are playing. Secondly, by focusing on a small range of 10 BPM, we ensure we are becoming comfortable enough without skipping ahead. The temptation might be, well, I got it okay at 130, let's jump to 140. And it might be we actually start to lose control at 136, 137, something like that. And we've neglected that. We've skipped it. And by jumping to 140, we might find, oh, I'm nearly there. And our quality starts slipping. Our quality assurance starts slipping, so to speak. So it gives me a chance. It gives me a method to have a very reachable goal within a practice session, and it keeps my focus because I'm not just sitting there on repetition 103 thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner tonight. I'm actually focusing on the quality because I'm on repetition 8 of 12 and I really want to get to that next tempo marking. So if I start at 130 and I do 12 repetitions really cleanly, I go up by 2. And again, and again. And imagine I'm getting to the point where I'm really comfortable with it and I manage to get to 140 within that sitting. Well, I can finish. I can move on and I can do something else. And then I can come back to it the next day. I can come back to it the next day. And maybe I can aim to go from 135 to 145. And if that goes well, maybe I go from 140 to 150 the next day. But the act of focusing on small increments, small manageable chunks with measurable goals is something that I find the metronome helps with no end. Let's recap what we've gone over then. First of all, from an execution standpoint, we're using the metronome to help us with 3 different things. First of all, making sure we're contextualized within the meter. What is the time signature? Where is the first beat of each bar? How does the figure we are playing align with that? Secondly, the beats themselves. How does the passage we are playing fit against the beat? Thirdly, the micro timing of the individual subdivisions. We can use our metronome to voice the lowest subdivision required within the meter, and we can make sure that each individual stroke of ours is accurate against that subdivision. This is from the execution standpoint. This will all help contextualize what we are playing and help increase our inner sense of time. It's very, very important, and it's very obvious when I encounter a student who hasn't done this because their inner sense of time is simply not strong enough. They lose their place, they're not sure at the correct speed, they're not quite sure of the rhythm, and it becomes quite clear they've not done enough work with the metronome. Secondly, we can use the various functions of modern digital metronomes to help us focus in our practicing itself. We can make small goals. I want to get from 130 to 140. I'm going to do 12 repetitions at each tempo marking, increasing by 2 BPM each time. But if I make a mistake, I'm going to go back by a BPM. Simple games like this, while they seem quite trivial, quite neat, they're actually a great way to keep you focused while moving towards the greater target. Now, for those of you interested, I'm using a metronome called Polynome, which is made by a good friend of mine, Joe Crabtree, and I'm really happy to endorse this metronome. I've worked with Joe on some of the features. It's a really powerful metronome, but virtually any digital metronome that you can get on the tablet or the phone can do this. And even some of the old battery-operated physical digital metronomes can at least voice the subdivision and demarcate the bars. If you are limited to one of the old-time analog metronomes, that's still absolutely fine, but you are not going to have the subdivision function and obviously some of the newer things like the loops. But whatever the case, the most important thing is that that metronome is marking the beat for you, and you are learning how the passage you are playing contextualizes against that beat. So I hope this has given you something to think about. If you are not doing so currently, please do consider incorporating a metronome into your practice routine, and hopefully some of the things I've discussed today will give you some ideas on how best to do that. Thank you very much for watching. See you on the next one.